is it weird to you that you've got this reputation for being a tech comedian? I mean, you're not. I don't think you know about coding. I never got the impression you're a real computer geek. But through various projects of yours, you've got that reputation.
I always feel like I know enough to do what I want to do, and I don't know anything else, and I pick it up as I go. There's stuff, and there's a lot of buzzwords being used here that mean absolutely nothing to me, and I don't care. I don't care how people are listening. I don't care what device they're listening on. I don't think they care. I think they care that they're listening.
Yeah,
that's the important thing. Like in the show that I did on tour last year, and we'll be doing 4 nights at the South Bank Centre in April, and the rest of it. It's called PowerPoint presentation because it's a PowerPoint presentation. And it involves me recounting, one tiny bit of it, for example, involves an exchange between myself and Jim Davidson on Twitter. And I have the screen grabs to show that this conversation actually happened on Twitter. And a few people, and it feels a bit like sort of mums. Like, as a friend of mine, I'll tell you this first. A friend of mine, him and his sister both work in the same industry, and his sister had gone to a party, and then his mum said to him, "Did you go to the same party that Sarah went to?" And he went, "No." And she went, "Oh, it doesn't matter, because someone from YouTube was there." And she thought that YouTube was a channel sending out reporters with video cameras. But
my mum described YouTube the other day as that one where people can send in their own videos.
Yes.
Posting them off.
Yeah. And... you can win £250. And people who were sort of maybe unfamiliar with Twitter go, "Oh, he's using Twitter, isn't it exciting? He's using Twitter. Look at that, isn't he modern? He's used Twitter in his comedy." And actually, if you saw a comedian saying, "I said this, and he said that, and he said this, so I said that," that would be normal. And I didn't think, "Oh, isn't it exciting using Twitter?" I just thought, I'm telling people about a conversation I've had, and this happens to be a medium where some conversations occur, just as the spoken word does. And it didn't feel different to me, and I don't think the majority of the audience thought, "Oh, this is different and exciting." They just thought, this is normal, this is a conversation. I don't care what the medium is, it's all just a conversation.
You were telling me your mum's on Twitter.
My mum is on
Twitter.
For her? It's hilarious. Her second tweet was, "Please stop sending Twitter messages to this phone." Her fourth or fifth tweet was, "I'm having lunch with Dave Gorman."
I suppose one of the first things where you became associated in people's minds with the internet was your Google Whack adventure, which was massively successful here as a book and as a stage production. For people who don't know what that was, can you sum it up succinctly and maybe give us a favourite memory from it?
It's a sort of complex thing. It's actually a sort of true story about having a breakdown, but it happened because I was meant to be writing a book, and I'd been given a lot of money to write a book, and I didn't write a book. And I received an email from a stranger who was Australian. At least I assume he was, because his first words on the email were, "G'day, Davo." And the next words were, "Did you know that you are a Google Whack?" And I didn't know what that meant, and there was only one part of my anatomy I could imagine an Australian calling a Google, and I didn't know why he wanted me to whack mine. Google Whack is what happens. It's almost impossible now, because the internet, this is the rate of change. I mean, the internet is probably 30 times bigger than it was then, and it was 2003. A Google Whack is what happens when you put 2 words into Google, with no quotes, just 2 words, and you hit search, and you find just one website. So what this man meant was, he'd searched for some reason francophile namesakes, and it had led to a page on my website, and I was the only website in the world at that time to have those 2 words on it. And so what happened over a period of months of me not writing a novel and spending all the money I'd been given to write a novel was I travelled the world meeting people whose websites were technically Google Whacks at that time, none of which are anymore.
And because that is a unique thing to have a Google Whack, these people were quite unique people.
Yeah, I think there was something, they all tended to be quite interesting people. I think weirdly, I think 75% of them were people who were living in countries where they weren't born, and I think there was something about the kind of people who were sort of different and doing things and travelling and had fingers in many pies and things, because that explained why there was this odd context. My favourite... and it's a guy I'm still in touch with. His name is Byron. He's an internet.com millionaire. He's a gun-toting Texan who homeschools his children and believes in creationism. And we disagree about every single thing ever, but we have fantastic dinners together every now and then in the States. He came to pick me up at a hotel in Texas and said, do you want to go to Mexico? And I said, yeah, okay, and jumped in his car. And then he showed me his gun. And then I said, why are we going to Mexico? And he said, I want to buy some Coke. And I got a bit scared. And what it turned out to be is he is a dot-com millionaire, and he is this sort of, proper sort of Bible-bashing creationist.
Yep.
And he likes Coca-Cola made with sugar. And nowadays it's all made with high-fructose corn syrup, apart from some of the stuff you can get in Mexico. So he drives over the border to Nuevo Laredo and buys Coke made the way he prefers it.
Talk about Radio Genius, was your Radio 4 program which transferred to television, where people would come on with their $1 million idea, if you like. Are there any, if I say to you, do you have any favourite ideas from Genius? The ones that spring to mind are?
Well, Genius was sort of like Dragon's Den for idiots. Although it did actually exist before Dragon's Den. I wish we'd actually done it for clever people. My favourites are ones that, and actually this is a really good example of how radio, I think, is better than TV in some instances. We had an idea, which we did on both the radio and TV versions, and it's far more successful on radio because it all happens in your own head. It was a guaranteed way of winning a gold medal at the Olympics, which is you enter the 100-metre sprint on 100-metre tall stilts, and when they fire the gun, you fall over. And you will cross the line before Usain Bolt. You will. And it's brilliant because it's all up here. You try and visualise that and put it on television, it loses so much. All the stuff that happened in your heads right there is far better, which is why I'm not that keen on the screen world necessarily taking over.
And your Absolute show, it's something, it's very conversational in these ways.
Yeah.
And it's something where you certainly solicit a lot of contributions from people listening either to the podcast or to the live program. Do you have a sense of a community?
Very much so, and there's lots of names that I'm familiar with and who sort of crop up every 2 or 3 shows. The same people are sending stuff in. We get stuff from Facebook and from Twitter, and we get people sending in emails, and we get people sending in texts. And I'm not necessarily aware of what's coming from which medium to us. One of my proudest moments of doing the show on Absolute, we do a Sunday morning show from 10 till 12, and it started with an email that somebody had sent us, and they just told us a story for no particular reason. And I think it was them sort of driving like a particular shade of burgundy Vauxhall Nova or something on the motorway, and they rarely see another car of the same colour, and they were driving along and they saw another Vauxhall Nova that was the same shade of burgundy, and they were overtaking it, and they got slightly worried that if they looked in they'd see them driving it and they didn't know who they were. So we did a whole Sunday morning show about existential self-doubt, and we had as much content from listeners as we get on any other kind of, and just being able to do 2 hours on Sunday morning about existential self-doubt, and everyone going, yeah, I know what that is, and I have an example.
This is commercial radio as well.
Yeah, on commercial radio. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's brilliant that you can bring those people in. I think someone you and I would both hold up as a kind of a brilliant broadcaster would be Danny Baker.
Yeah.
And I think he's a brilliant example of someone who has curated his own audience, who has travelled from place to place, and wherever he goes, smart people follow him, so he can ask those kind of questions on radio and get smart people answering it. Because obviously, if the first time you go on, you're asking a question, you don't know who's out there, and it whittles down by shape. By doing it week in, week out, you create a personality of the show. I don't mean of yourself, of the show, and of your audience, and the people who are of a like mind come to you, and you build a place where you can have those kind of conversations.
We talked about being curator of music or information before. Something that I've always enjoyed from you is you're very good at finding things on the internet that other people have difficulty unearthing. I just wanted to ask you briefly to describe, I think the favourite one I ever heard you talk about was a website called PDET.
Oh, yes. Yeah, no, sorry, it took me a moment. PDET was Paul Daniels' eBay transactions.
Yeah.
That somebody was blogging about Paul Daniels' eBay transactions. Paul Daniels is on eBay.
Yeah.
He has a profile that says, for those who are interested, yes, it is me, the famous magician. And so you can see his recent transactions, and somebody made it their business to log in as often as they could and look at his profile and then sort of review what he was buying. There's a lot of horror films, a lot of schlocky horror films, some very sexy boots. Presumably for Debbie, presumably, yeah. And the things he was selling, old tricks and posters, but he would be selling sort of a Gloria Hunniford autobiography for £1.50 and it just became deeply fascinating because it's like a piece of character comedy, and not about Paul Daniels, about whoever it is who's gone. I'd like to blog this.
Yeah.
Daily, I'm going to see what Paul Daniels has traded. That's just I love stuff like that.
Do you get the impression Paul Daniels makes a lot of money from eBay?
Well, if you look at that blog, no. But it ticks over.
Good.
Yeah, no.
It's good to know.
A little often. I think that's been his motto for life.
A little often.
A little but often, yeah.
Dave Gorman.
And Jeff Lloyd.